Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the ancient sun-bleached highlands of medieval Ethiopia, a place of stone churches, high plateaus, whispering winds, and daily rituals unchanged for centuries. Imagine waking before the sun even dares to rise, the air thin and biting, and your bed nothing more than a woven mat on the packed earth. The distant whoops of hyenas echo from the cliffs. You squint through the darkness and realize, yeah, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake inside a home carved of stone and mortar. The walls rough and cool to the touch, smelling faintly of wood smoke and the dried herbs your host tucked into the thatch roof for luck. The ceiling is low. You've probably hit your head already. Twice. The floor is earthen, packed tight by centuries of footsteps and the occasional goat nap. You roll from your sleeping mat, stiff-limbed and disoriented, and immediately regret leaving the warmth of your wool shawl. It's cold. Not grab-a-jacket cold. This is highland chill. Your breath fogs in the air. Somewhere outside someone's already singing. Medieval Ethiopia doesn't believe in sleeping in. There's no rooster alarm clock. There are humans for that. Specifically, an elderly man with a voice that could cut through fog and a mission to wake the village for morning prayers. You can hear him now, his call moving across the terraces like smoke. Blinking the sleep from your eyes, you step outside. Your door creaks, a heavy slab of wood reinforced with iron nails. You're in the northern highlands, likely Tigray or Lasta. The view, breathtaking if you can ignore the altitude headache. The land rolls like frozen waves, green and gold under the early light, stone terraces wrapping around slopes like giant belts. As you step into the morning mist, the altitude hits you properly. Medieval Ethiopian villages sat often above 2,000 meters, and your lowland lungs are struggling. You're lightheaded, but too proud to sit down. A local child laughs at your wobble. They've been running up mountains since they could walk. You, on the other hand, need a moment, maybe two. You glance around. Mud brick houses with flat roofs cluster like nesting birds, some with circular shapes, others rectangular. Smoke curls up from cooking fires. Goats bleat from woven pens. The air smells of dung smoke, eucalyptus, and fresh dew. You hear the rhythmic swish of someone sweeping dust from dust. Your host family greets you with sleepy nods and a small plate of kolo, roasted barley, and maybe, if you're lucky, a spoonful of honey. No spoons, though. You eat with your fingers. A few chickens dart across the path, and a wiry teenager shoos a stubborn mule away from the drinking trough. Water is hauled uphill each day in clay jars, so every drop is precious. You rinse your hands from a shared bowl, careful not to spill a drop. Welcome to Highland conservation. Even here, in this quiet rural life, politics isn't far off. Though you're a mere guest in this village, you're very much on the radar. Outsiders don't blend in well. Not with your soft skin, your lack of calluses, and your clumsy gait. But Ethiopians are famously hospitable, especially in the highlands, so long as you follow the rules. And one of the rules, no sandals inside, not even if they're hand-stitched leather from Axum's finest market. You learn this the hard way when you almost walk into someone's house wearing shoes. A grandmother gasps like you just set the altar on fire. You spend the next 10 minutes apologizing profusely, hands over heart. She forgives you eventually, after you offer to fetch water for the week. But despite the occasional social stumble, the villagers are kind. You're quickly handed a stick for balance. You'll need it. A hooded shawl to block the sun later, and a stern warning not to pet the livestock. That fluffy sheep. Not friendly. Also possibly a reincarnated ancestor, depending on who you ask. The jury's out on how literally that's meant. A little girl tugs your hand and points to the horizon. Time for the real morning ritual. No, not coffee yet. That's coming. First, you're going to the cliffside. You follow her up a narrow trail cut into the hillside, slipping a little on loose stone. You pass under acacia trees and alongside terraced fields where young and set trees grow, the so-called false banana of the Ethiopian diet. They're green and broad-leaved, but you won't be eating fruit from them. Enset is all about the starchy, fermented pulp scraped from inside its trunk. Delicious. Eventually. Ferment it wrong, though, and you get sick. Very sick. Experts still debate whether inset cultivation began in the south and spread north or vice versa, but either way, this humble plant will be part of every meal today. As you crest the ridge, the wind hits you full in the chest. It's loud and persistent, like the mountains themselves are whispering secrets to each other. And there, stretching before you, is a valley so deep it might as well be the mouth of time. Fog curls in the ravines, sunlight slants golden over distant peaks, and the world below still sleeps. You breathe in, thin air, cold air, sacred air. Somewhere behind you, someone begins chanting. It's not church, not yet. This is more personal, a moment with the ancestors. A few of the villagers murmur prayers into the wind. A man presses a hand to a stone marked with faint crosses, almost invisible unless you know to look. You pretend you do. You whisper, too, something soft and respectful. You're not sure if you're doing it right, but nobody stops you. You close your eyes. The wind whistles, the sun warms your face, and for just a second you forget your aching calves and burning lungs. You feel strangely peaceful. Then someone nudges you. Coffee? Yes. Finally. You turn and follow the scent of roasting beans. Smoke trails from a nearby courtyard. You don't know it yet, but the ritual waiting for you will take over an hour, involve grass strewn on the floor, 3 rounds of increasingly potent brews, and a story about a goat who started it all. But that, sleepy traveller, is for the next leg of your long, exhausting, weirdly soothing day. You follow your nose more than your feet. There's smoke in the air, not the sharp tang of burning wood, but something richer, almost sweet. Coffee, or at least what will become coffee if you're patient. Emphasis on if, because in medieval Ethiopia this isn't just your morning pick-me-up. This is a ritual, a ceremony, a sacred social glue, and you're about to be neck-deep in it before your stomach's even had a proper breakfast. You're led into a small courtyard shaded by a flowering Cordia africana tree. Its orange blossoms scatter across the packed dirt like confetti. A woven mat is unrolled for you. Not a chair in sight. You sit cross-legged, adjusting your tunic awkwardly, trying not to show how cold the stone beneath is. A young woman crouches by a clay brazier, fanning glowing coals with a strip of goat hide. She gives you a shy glance, then returns to her task, roasting raw green coffee beans in a shallow pan, slowly, patiently, stirring them until they begin to crackle and darken. This is your first introduction to the bunna ceremony. It will not be your last. It's not simply a drink. It's community. It's rhythm. It's time itself slowing to a crawl, measured in the phases of preparation. You begin to understand the coffee's not here to wake you up. It's here to stretch the morning out like a soft wool shawl, comforting and deliberate. Around you, children giggle. An elder sharpens a stick with a dull knife. Someone starts humming a tune that doesn't seem to have an end. No one checks the time, because there's no clock, and besides, the coffee isn't done yet. The beans now roasted, the woman lifts the pan and wafts the fragrant smoke toward each guest. Yes, including you. It's not optional. You lean forward obediently, taking in the scent. It's earthy, almost chocolatey, with a slightly sour edge. You nod like you understand. You don't, but it's polite. Next comes the grind. No grinders here. Just a stone mortar and pestle, and a rhythmic thunk-thunk-thunk that beats like a sleepy drum. The roasted beans are ground by hand, the air thick with their scent. You're already beginning to feel oddly alert, despite the fact that not a drop has touched your lips. Experts still debate whether this ceremony developed as a response to the communal nature of Ethiopian highland living, or if it predated coffee drinking itself, adapted from older incense rituals. Either way, this isn't something slapped together in 5 minutes before heading to work. This is the work. Once the grounds are ready, they're added to a bulbous clay pot, the jabina. Water follows, carefully measured, then the pot is nestled into the hot coals. The spout is plugged with a tuft of horsehair to keep grounds from spilling out during boiling, and then you wait. It simmers, gurgles. You're staring at a clay pot as if your life depends on it. Everyone else seems perfectly content. One old man begins recounting a story, something about a goat named Kaldi who noticed his flock acting strange after chewing on some mysterious red berries. Sound familiar? It should. It's the closest thing the world has to a coffee origin myth. Scholars remain divided on whether Kaldi ever existed, or if his tale was invented centuries later by over-caffeinated scribes. You listen, sipping a bit of water from a horn cup. Someone hands you a piece of kolo, roasted barley grains mixed with bits of chickpea and the occasional sliver of ginger. It's simple, a little smoky, and surprisingly satisfying. Still no actual coffee, though. The pot is finally removed from the fire and allowed to settle. This isn't espresso. There are no pressure valves or fancy machines, just gravity, heat, and time. Once the grounds sink, the first round is poured. Abel, strong, bitter, aromatic. The woman serving uses a practiced swirl of the wrist to direct the flow into tiny handleless cups, careful not to disturb the grounds. You're given yours last, both a sign of respect and subtle hierarchy. You try not to take it personally, you raise the cup, everyone watches, you sip. And, okay, yeah, that's strong. It hits like a goat kick. No milk, no sugar, just straight highland truth. Your face says, wow. Everyone laughs gently. You've passed the first test. The first cup is for stimulation. Conversation starts to flow. Not loud, never loud, but relaxed. There's no gossip yet. That's for cup 2, toner. More water is added to the pot. The second brew is lighter, smoother, friendlier. You lean back, warmer now, hands cupped around the clay vessel, your body beginning to understand why this ritual exists. The toner comes with chat, updates on the harvest, news from a travelling merchant, a debate about whether a rooster crowed at the wrong time last night. Your host leans in and whispers that the third round, Bereka, means blessing. Some folks stay for it, some don't. But if you're truly welcome here, you'll stay. Not because you're expected to, but because you want to. So, you stay. You sip the third cup slowly, each drop cooler than the last. Someone begins singing. Another pulls out a krayer, a small lyre, and starts strumming a tune that winds up like ivy and never really resolves. A child curls up beside you and dozes off, their head heavy against your side. You notice now how time has stretched. You've been here for over an hour and done very little, and yet it feels full. Your mind no longer racing, your body still tired but calmer. You begin to understand something about medieval Ethiopian life. It's not about rushing, it's about rhythm, patterns, breathing with the land, drinking slowly, not because you have to, but because everything good takes time. As the coals die down and the sky turns from pink to bright gold, the courtyard begins to stir. People stretch. A goat sneezes. Your host stands and beckons you. Time for breakfast, finally. And no, it's not cereal. You dust off your tunic, tuck your borrowed shawl tighter around your shoulders, and give a little bow to the woman who prepared the buna. She nods without looking up, already washing out the jabina, ready to do it all again tomorrow. You're warmed now, awake, slightly buzzing, and just in time. Because next, you'll be offered food that might confuse you, thrill you, or possibly send you running for the hills. You shuffle a little slower now, not because you're tired, but because the air has taken on that specific kind of heaviness that says, food is coming, and not just any food. Breakfast in medieval Ethiopia is a hearty affair. This isn't a rushed affair with toast and jam. No, this is fermented grain, spiced butter, and possibly something that was alive a few minutes ago. Bon appétit. You're led to another shaded area, this time inside the family home, which is warmer now from the morning sun seeping through narrow slats in the wooden shutters. The smell hits you first. It's unfamiliar. Rich, sour, tangy. It smells like someone buried bread and forgot about it for a few months, then decided it was time to party. What you're smelling is injera. But this isn't the fluffy pancake you might know from modern Ethiopian restaurants. No, this is medieval injera, made from a grain called TF, fermented over days, then poured onto a flat clay griddle called a mitad, and cooked until spongy and soft. It's huge. Each round is like a woolen shawl laid flat on a plate, dotted with tiny holes like the surface of the moon. You're offered a slice rolled loosely like a scroll. You hesitate. It's warm, slightly damp, and has a vinegary tang that tickles your nose. You take a bite. And, okay, yeah, it's sour, like lemon wrapped in yeast sour, but also soft and strangely comforting. The texture's odd, but not unpleasant. It's definitely not toast. It's alive in a way, fermented, fiercely local. Alongside it comes a spoonful of nita kibe. a spiced, clarified butter infused with garlic, ginger and wild herbs. It's golden and fragrant and starts to melt the second it hits the injera. You're also handed a small portion of kincha, cracked barley porridge, cooked until creamy. No sugar, of course. Just a bit of salt and maybe, if you're lucky, a smudge of goat cheese on top. There's also raw meat. Wait, really? Yes, terra sega. Slices of freshly butchered beef, sometimes dipped in a fiery mustard sauce or rolled in mitmita, ground chili powder. It's not always served, and in some regions, especially during fasting seasons, it would be unthinkable. But today, apparently you've arrived on a special occasion. Maybe a relative returned from a long journey, or maybe they just think you look a little too thin. You try to be polite, but your eyes betray you. Your host laughs, slicing a piece and gesturing for you to try. You hesitate, then dip it delicately into the mustard. It's soft, chewy, and somehow clean-tasting. Your inner food safety alarm bells are going wild, but your taste buds are intrigued. Historical fact: Ethiopians have practiced raw beef preparation for centuries. In fact, some scholars believe it arose as a tactical advantage. Eating raw meat in wartime left no smoke trail to betray a soldier's position. Whether that's true or folk legend, experts still debate, but the tradition has long roots. You chase the bite with more injera, using it as both utensil and buffer zone. No forks or knives here. Everything is done by hand, right hand only. You mess up almost immediately and use your left. A collective gasp. Someone's grandmother whispers something about curses. You apologize with your eyes and switch hands. The mood recovers. Barely. As you eat, you begin to feel it. That heaviness in your stomach that says, I've eaten something deep. Not just calories, culture, history, intestinal risk, but mostly history. The room is filled with quiet chewing and low murmurs. The elder across from you begins discussing the qualities of different TF harvests, red, white, and the prize black TF used by nobility. You nod like you know what any of that means. Then someone brings out honey. Not in a neat little bear-shaped bottle. This is real honey, scooped from a clay pot, thick with wax and maybe a bee leg or two. It's served on a flat stone plate, drizzled over more barley and pressed into little mounds with calloused fingers. You try it. It's divine. Like sunlight and flowers and something slightly spicy. It melts into the grains, clinging to your fingertips. A child sneezes, startling a chicken under the table. No one blinks. And now, with your belly full and your fingers sticky, the conversation drifts toward livestock. Because here, livestock isn't just food, it's currency, inheritance, and identity. A man leans in and asks how many cows your father owns. You freeze. Everyone laughs. It's a joke. Probably. The walls of the house are decorated with hanging gourds and bundles of dried herbs. A wooden cross leans above the door. No paintings, no clocks, no decoration for the sake of decoration. Everything here serves a purpose. Or did, at one point. You're motioned outside again. Breakfast is over. You're full. You're warm. You're pretty sure your digestive system is in shock. But there's no time to nap. Because it's Sunday. And Sunday means church, not the soft pew, hymn-singing, hour-long affair you might expect. No, this is an expedition, a hike, possibly a pilgrimage, and definitely a test of your legs, lungs, and ability to pretend you're not regretting every bite of that raw beef. You grab your stick, adjust your shawl, and follow your host down a winding trail that seems to go in the wrong direction. Up, always up. You ask how far it is. No one answers. They just laugh. The sun's higher now, the mist has burned away, and the land glows gold and green. Terraced fields glitter with dew. The trail is narrow, the air thin. You pass a mule carrying firewood, a barefoot boy with a sling, and a woman balancing an impossible bundle of grass on her back, smiling as she goes. Your legs already ache. But ahead, carved into the mountain itself, are the distant spires and arches of a rock-hewn church. And you're going to make it there. Eventually. Hopefully. If the meat doesn't get you first. The trail twists upward like a goat's idea of a joke. You're not climbing a hill. You're ascending a stone stairway built for saints. Or, more accurately, for medieval villagers who walk this route barefoot 3 times a week without breaking a sweat. You, meanwhile, are gasping like someone asked you to carry a donkey on your back. And it's not even hot yet. You grip your walking stick, a stout branch offered by your host, polished smooth by years of hands, and focus on placing one foot in front of the other. The path is etched into the mountainside, narrow and flanked by spiny bushes and the occasional cactus. Your borrowed goat-hide shoes, soft, flat, and entirely without arch support, are not doing you any favours. The air is thin, sharp, laced with wildflowers and the faint, persistent scent of ash. Behind you, the village is already a distant memory, its clay rooftops blending into the hills like sun-warmed puzzle pieces. Ahead, the rock-hewn church waits, silent and stoic, carved deep into the earth as if the mountain once swallowed a cathedral and forgot to burp. Your companions ascend with ease. A grandmother in a white knitterless scarf practically floats up the incline. A young boy darts ahead to chase a monkey off the trail. You pause and pretend to admire the view, which is, to be fair, breathtaking, though mostly because your lungs have given up on oxygen and are now considering other gases. Eventually the trail flattens and you reach the top of a ridge. There, nestled in a cradle of cliffs, sits the church, dark, monolithic, and unmistakably ancient. Its facade is etched directly into the stone, windows framed in carved arches, crosses chiselled by hand. There's no paint, no steeple, just gravity, history, and endurance. Welcome to one of Ethiopia's legendary rock-hewn churches. While the most famous cluster lies in Lalibela, medieval Ethiopia had dozens scattered across the highlands, many still in use. Scholars still debate the exact dates of construction. Some claim they date back to the 12th century, others say older, but the jury's out. What's clear, though, is this. You're about to walk into a place that has echoed with human prayers for nearly 1,000 years. But first, you undress, sort of. You're told to remove your shoes, all of them, even the double-layered goat-hide pair you wore so proudly this morning. You try not to flinch as your bare feet touch the cold, pebbled ground. The stones are slick with centuries of footsteps, and maybe a bit of goat urine. You join the slow-moving line of villagers at the entrance. There's no door, just a shadowed archway leading into the mountain's heart. As you step inside, the temperature drops. The air becomes still, heavy, laced with frankincense and something more primal. Stone, sweat, and 1,000 whispered devotions. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The interior is dim, lit only by slivers of sunlight slipping through narrow slits in the stone walls. The silence is profound, not absence of noise silence, but a textured, layered stillness that seems to muffle even your thoughts. The floor is uneven. The walls, though carefully chiselled, remain raw, tools marks still visible under a fine layer of soot. Iconic Ethiopian Orthodox crosses, some painted, others incised directly into the rock, decorate the alcoves. A few are freshened with bright pigment, others faded into the colour of old blood. You tiptoe past a row of villagers already deep in prayer. Some are kneeling, others stand motionless, leaning on staffs. One man is bowed so deeply his forehead touches the floor. The rhythm of the place is unlike any worship you've seen. There are no pews, no sermons booming from speakers, just slow chants, occasional claps, and the shuffling of sandaled feet. A priest emerges from behind a carved curtain. He's robed in layered cotton, a tall woven cross in one hand, and what you think is a prayer book in the other. But the book is written in Ge'ez, an ancient liturgical language older than most alphabets. You smile politely. He does not. This is not the time for small talk. He dips a bundle of dried grass in holy water and flicks it across the crowd. You're caught by surprise. A cold splash to the cheek. Congratulations. You've been blessed and slightly startled. He speaks in a low, resonant tone. You catch words here and there. Salam, peace. Mekdes, sanctuary. A young boy nearby whispers the translations to you between yawns. Apparently he's seen this service so often he can recite it backwards. Your knees begin to ache from standing. Your toes are numb from the stone, but something about the space keeps you still. It feels rooted. Time stretches here. The centuries are not past. They are present, folded into the shadows, carried in the chants, alive in the air. You move deeper into the church where a candle flickers on a ledge. Carved saints stare down at you with enormous eyes and elongated fingers. The proportions are strange, almost dreamlike, but their presence is unmistakable. Some were etched nearly a millennium ago. Others, touched up just last week. In a side chamber, a mother rocks a baby in rhythm with the priest's chant. A man beside her taps a hand drum in quiet counterpoint. A girl leans against a stone column, her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. You, meanwhile, are trying to keep from sneezing. The incense is thick now, sweet, spicy, and borderline aggressive. You breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. Finally, the priest raises his hand. The chant slows, then stops. A final clap. Silence again. You step outside, blinking into the sunlight. The world seems brighter, sharper. The wind picks up, cool and dry, brushing your face like an exhale from the mountain itself. The congregation mills about, chatting quietly. Some linger, others begin the trek back. A boy tries to balance on one foot. A goat bleats from a rock ledge, unimpressed by your spiritual awakening. And you feel something shifting inside you, a mix of awe, exhaustion, and possibly early-stage dehydration. You follow your host down a different path this time, winding past olive trees and the crumbling remains of an old watchtower. Your stick clicks on the stone as you walk. You don't speak, you just walk. The church is behind you. The trail winds ahead. And somewhere, just ahead, is an argument over theology that will make you wish you had stayed longer in silence. You're barely 10 steps from the church courtyard when the atmosphere shifts. It starts subtly. Two men talking with slightly too much animation, arms gesturing wider than necessary. Then a third voice chimes in, sharper, and someone claps for attention. You're still adjusting your goat-hide shoes, but your ears perk up. There's a crowd gathering by the stone wall near a large fig tree. You approach cautiously. Your host gives you that tight-lipped smile people use right before something awkward happens. They're discussing doctrine, he says, which in this part of medieval Ethiopia is code for, you might want to stand back unless you enjoy watching people debate scripture like it's a wrestling match. What begins as a polite exchange over the nature of the Trinity, yes, we're going straight into the deep end, quickly spirals into a verbal tug-of-war. It's about whether a certain saint's intercession should be invoked directly, or only via prayer to the Virgin Mary. The details blur together for you, and frankly for some of the bystanders. But the passion, that part is crystal clear. One man quotes from the Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian epic blending religious legend and royal legitimacy. Another fires back with a line from a monk's commentary, written who knows when. A third participant, barefoot with a prayer rope coiled around his wrist, points skyward dramatically and says, "The truth is not for the ears alone, but for the soul." A solid line. You make a mental note to steal it during your next argument with a roommate. But here's the surprising thing. No one's shouting. Sure, the voices are strong, but the energy isn't hostile. It's vigorous, yes, like a game of chess played with eyebrows and psalms, but it's not angry. The debate is the entertainment, the education, and the exercise all in one. The line between scholar, priest, and farmer is more porous than you'd expect. This isn't unique. Throughout medieval Ethiopia, theological discussion was part of public life. Many lay people were astonishingly well versed in scripture, saints' lives, and liturgical nuance. Experts still debate how widespread literacy was outside monastic communities, but oral learning was formidable, and you're seeing it in action right now. Meanwhile, you're standing there nodding solemnly, understanding approximately 5% of what's being said. A kind woman offers you a leaf to sit on. You gratefully accept and crouch beside her. "Don't worry," she whispers with a grin. "They argue every Sunday." You relax a little, grateful for the company and the shade. The sun's climbing higher now, making the stone wall behind you warm to the touch. A bee hovers near your head. You wave it away lazily. Suddenly, the debate takes a culinary turn. One man uses the preparation of injera as a metaphor for spiritual growth. The fermentation represents tia, he soul's refinement. Another counters that too much fermentation, like too much pride, leads to a sour heart. Someone else argues that teff grains are like parables, small but containing multitudes. And just like that, you're back in familiar territory, food theology. Then, just as swiftly as it began, the conversation winds down, not with a winner, not with a conclusion, but with a nod, a sigh, and a murmured prayer. A nearby child claps 3 times in imitation and bursts out laughing. Everyone turns, the tension breaks, People smile, shake hands, share a few last words, and begin to drift away. Your host reappears and hands you a cup of water, warm from the gourd but still refreshing. You drink slowly, savouring each sip. He tells you the fig tree you're leaning against is said to be nearly 300 years old. You look up at its knotted branches, thick with leaves and sun-dappled shade, and wonder how many such debates it's overheard. There's a quiet pause, the kind that follows deep talk or deep naps. You glance around. A woman begins sweeping the church threshold with a bundle of straw. A pair of boys race up the hillside, laughing and yelling about something that involves a goat and a stolen melon. An elderly man ties up his sandals with practiced grace, then sits back down to rest, humming a slow melody. You think you're safe. You think the drama is over. And then it begins again. This time it's not theology, it's taxes. Or more precisely, whether the local noble's messenger really conveyed the latest Galt land grant adjustment accurately. You watch as 3 elders draw imaginary property lines in the dust with sticks. A 4th sighs deeply, muttering that nothing changes and everything changes. You stay seated. This one's above your pay grade. But all this, the arguing, the quoting, the dusty finger maps, is part of the rhythm here. It's not chaos, it's conversation. It's how a society built into cliffs and valleys keeps itself coherent. Law, religion, tradition, they're not locked in dusty scrolls. They're living things, spoken aloud under trees and beside churches. You begin to see how it works. Someone offers you a small loaf of barley bread. It's dense, warm, flecked with herbs. You tear off a piece and eat slowly. You don't speak. You just chew and listen and absorb. And before you know it, the sun has shifted again. The breeze carries the scent of cardamom and smoke. You realise it's nearing midday. Your host pats your shoulder gently. "Come," he says. "The market's open." You stand, brush the dust from your tunic and follow him down another winding trail. The fig tree stands tall behind you, still and listening. And up ahead, tucked into the next valley, is the place where theology gives way to trade and debates become whispers behind stalls full of salt, honey and rumour. You hear the market before you see it, low hums of chatter, the occasional bray of a donkey, the rhythmic slap of woven sandals on dust. It spills over the edge of a broad valley basin, nestled between eucalyptus groves and terraced fields. The smell hits you next. Spice, earth, firewood smoke, and something a little fishy you'd rather not investigate too closely. This isn't a medieval supermarket, it's organised chaos. Tents made of patched fabric lean against crooked poles. Goods are displayed on woven mats or straight on the ground. Merchants squat beside their wares, cloaks wrapped tightly despite the growing heat. There are no signs, no price tags, just eyes, gestures, and the subtle ballet of negotiation. As you descend the slope into the heart of the market, your host slows his pace and mutters a reminder, "Speak less, look more." You nod. It seems wise and necessary. Because here, communication isn't all words. It's glances, pauses, eyebrow lifts, and the careful avoidance of direct eye contact. You've never been more aware of your own eyebrows. You pass a woman selling clay jars, some filled with dried herbs, others with sticky yellow honeycombs still crawling with bees. Next to her, a trader displays wooden combs, slingshots, and leather amulets. A few paces down, a man crouches beside a pile of salt blocks the size of bricks. This, your host whispers, is serious currency. Forget coins. This is the kind of salt you can build an alliance with. Salt wasn't just seasoning in medieval Ethiopia, it was value. Blocks of it, called a mole, were carved from mountain deposits and traded across the empire. Some were carried by camel caravans all the way to the Red Sea ports. Others stayed here, passed hand to hand for spices, cloth or favours. Scholars remain divided on how standardised its value was. Some say it was as reliable as minted currency. Others argue it depended entirely on local demand and who you were trading with. You pause near a spice mat. The scents swirl upward. Dried basil, crushed chili, black cumin, and something that smells like cinnamon's wilder cousin. The merchant looks up but says nothing, just nods. You nod back. You're learning. Then comes the honey. Oh, the honey. Thick golden globs stored in gourds and clay jars, often mixed with bee parts and mystery. You sample a fingerful offered on a strip of bark. It's dark, musky, almost smoky, with a hint of wildflower. It clings to your teeth and warms your chest like a soft fire. Next to the honey jars sit tall, narrow-necked clay bottles filled with tejje, fermented honey wine. You're offered a sip. It's sweet, sharp, slightly fizzy, and strong. You hand it back quickly. This early in the day, you don't trust yourself with more than one gulp of something that smells like sunshine and feels like a hidden punch. You glance up and realise the market has eyes. Not in a spooky way. More like attentive, quietly curious. Everyone notices you. Of course they do. You're the outsider, the visitor, the one who fumbled the coffee ceremony and asked if Enset was like a banana. But there's no mockery here, just observation. The market isn't hostile, it's testing you, and right now you're passing. A boy tries to sell you a chicken. You politely decline. The chicken disagrees, flapping wildly from under his arm. He grins, shrugs, and moves on. Your host points toward a group of elderly men crouched in a circle near the centre of the market, murmuring over a scroll laid flat on a cloth. The script is unmistakably G's. One of the men traces the lines with a gnarled finger, stopping occasionally to debate a line. The scroll's likely religious or legal, but here, that distinction can be blurry. Law often flowed through liturgy, and justice was as much a spiritual question as a social one. You pass a woman selling hand-woven shamas, long cotton wraps with delicately embroidered borders. She lifts one and drapes it over your shoulders. You look unexpectedly like you belong, or at least like you tried. She doesn't charge you, just smiles and returns to her loom. Trade here isn't transactional in the way you expect, it's relational. Who you know, how you behave, whether you linger long enough to smell the coriander, that all matters. A successful trade isn't just about price, it's about patience, presence, and the silent recognition of humanity across a few feet of packed earth. A group of girls pass by carrying bundles of firewood on their backs, laughing about something just out of earshot. A baby goat wanders between stalls, nibbling at a basket of dried leaves until its owner scoops it up and ties it to a post. A man in a red cloak sings softly as he sharpens a curved blade on a stone, his rhythm soothing, hypnotic. Then, for just a moment, everything slows. You stop at a vendor with nothing on display but a jar of ink, a reed pen, and a thin stack of parchment. A scribe, one of the rare few who writes for others, love letters, legal claims, or prayers too personal to speak aloud. He looks up at you and tilts his head. You don't ask for anything, but you nod. He nods back. No words, just a shared understanding that some stories aren't yours to write today. By now, the sun has shifted high overhead. The market begins to quiet, not from fatigue but transition. Merchants rewrap goods. Buyers weigh their options, or their salt. Children grow sleepy in the shadows of tents. Somewhere nearby, a drumbeat begins, soft and slow, like a heartbeat echoing across the valley. Your host touches your shoulder. "Come," he says, "we'll eat under the fig tree." And so you leave the market, your hands empty, your mind full, already savouring the sound of laughter beneath leaves and the familiar sour comfort of fermented bread and lentils. You follow your host up a sloping footpath, stomach rumbling in agreement with the rhythm of your footsteps. The sun now casts everything in amber. Shadows have shortened, but the heat hasn't yet reached that shimmering, oppressive stage. It's the perfect hour for a long, quiet lunch, and apparently that means a fig tree. You reach the spot. It's not grand, just peaceful. A gnarled old tree anchoring a bend in the path, its roots cracking through layers of stone. Beneath its wide canopy, woven mats have already been laid out. A few families are already sitting in clusters, passing bowls, tearing injera, sipping from shared cups. The tree's branches sway slightly, its broad leaves whispering secrets in the afternoon breeze. You settle beside your host. Someone you don't know hands you a folded square of injera, still warm and faintly steaming. Another person sets down a wide, shallow bowl in the centre of the mat. Lentils, thick and orange-red, spiced gently with berbere and garlic. A dollop of what looks like mashed spinach appears beside it, glossy with oil and sharp with lemon. You nod your thanks and follow the rhythm. Tear, scoop, eat, repeat. It's quiet, but not silent. Voices drift on the air, gentle gossip, quiet laughter, the occasional shouted correction to a wandering goat. No one is hurrying, No one's checking a schedule. Here, lunch is not a break from the day, it is the day, and then comes the camel herder. You didn't notice him at first, too focused on the lentils perhaps, but now he's sitting beside your host, his long walking stick resting across his lap. He wears a turban loose around his shoulders, and his cloak smells of sun and dry grasses. He begins telling a story, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft current of words, directed more at the tree than the crowd. It's about a camel who refused to kneel for the night, no matter what was promised. He describes the stars over the salt plains, the windstorms that erase entire paths, and the time a scorpion stung his favourite goat. People nod and chuckle at the right parts, and someone, possibly his cousin, mutters, "That goat had it coming." You chew slowly, letting the words melt into the food. It becomes hard to tell where the story ends and the meal begins. The rhythm of it all, the shaded light, the slow chewing, the easy storytelling, works like a lullaby for your nerves. Mid-bite, you realise you haven't heard a single raised voice since sitting down. There's something deeply collaborative about the meal. Everyone watches out for one another's cup. No one lets the injera pile run low, and when the bowl of lentils dips below halfway, someone already has a new one coming. It's an unspoken choreography, rehearsed through centuries of communal life. You ask softly about the injera flour. Your host explains that the tief used today came from a cousin's farm, a 2-day walk to the west. It's drier there, but the soil is volcanic, rich and dark. The flour was milled last week, fermented for 3 days, cooked this morning. You nod solemnly, as if you didn't nearly burn your tongue 5 minutes ago. Then come the questions for you. Where are you from? Why are you here? What's your job? Do people in your land eat with their hands? Are your mountains taller than these? You answer as best you can. You smile a lot. You say, "I don't know," a little more than you'd like. But the questions aren't invasive. They're curious. They're invitations. And you realise this isn't a test. It's a welcome. You offer to help pass out the last round of cups. The tej is lighter this time, less sharp, more floral. The fig tree offers its shade freely. A child braids a strand of dry grass and ties it around your wrist. You don't ask why. It seems like a good idea to leave some things unspoken. Nearby, someone begins to hum. A tune with no beginning, no end. You join in under your breath, unsure of the melody, but confident it doesn't matter. You glance up through the canopy. The sun flickers between leaves. Tiny figs hang above you like sleepy bells. Bees drift lazily through the light. A quirky fact slips into conversation. Someone claims fig trees are sacred because they grow without asking for anything. No pruning, no coaxing. Just time. Like good neighbours, says an old woman, or old shoes. People laugh. The moment stretches, softens. Your eyes feel heavy, but not from exhaustion. More like fullness, stillness, the kind that settles deep in your limbs and makes you forget what clocks are for. And just as you're beginning to consider lying flat for a moment and using a folded cloak as a pillow, your host stands. "We must greet the noblewoman," he says with a smile. You blink. "Noblewoman?" He nods. "She'll want to show you her weavers." Of course she will. Naturally. Because in medieval Ethiopia, no lazy afternoon is complete without a spontaneous demonstration of textile excellence. You stand, brush fig leaves from your tunic, and offer the fig tree a silent thank you. As you walk, your host pats your back and adds, "Don't worry, you'll just be watching, unless they ask you to try spinning thread." You don't know whether to be excited or terrified, probably both. You climb a narrow ridge path now, limbs heavier than they were an hour ago. Blame the teje or the lentils, or that storytelling rhythm still echoing faintly behind your ears. The sun hangs lower than before, casting long, soft shadows that stretch across the terraced hillside like old wool being laid out to dry. Your host is oddly energetic. "She's one of the most respected women in this district," he says, practically skipping ahead. "Her cloth goes to courts, even to Axum." You nod like that means something. And actually it does. Axum, once a kingdom, now a royal memory, still holds enormous cultural weight in medieval Ethiopia. To say someone's textiles are good enough for Axum is like saying your sourdough starter got a papal blessing. The house, when you reach it, is both modest and grand. Modest in size, but immaculate. Painted white with natural lime, its thatched roof perfectly symmetrical, the front stoop swept clean, as if the wind itself had been trained in etiquette, A tall eucalyptus pole marks the entrance, a scrap of indigo cloth fluttering at the top. A subtle sign, this is a home of skilled hands. You're welcomed in with the formality of a royal envoy, offered water, seated on a woven bench, and immediately handed a small gourd filled with a sweet gingery infusion that tastes like perfume and healing at once. You sip slowly. Your knees are grateful for the bench. Then the noblewoman appears. She's older than you expected, wrinkles etched deep like topography. But her back is straight, and her voice cuts clean through the afternoon air. She wears a robe of soft, naturally dyed cotton, undyed in places, saffron and rust in others, draped with mathematical precision. Around her neck hangs a charm made of twisted silver wire and something that looks suspiciously like a shard of Roman glass. She nods once and motions for you to follow. You pass through the house, out the back, and into a courtyard that smells of smoke, sweat, and lavender, or something lavender adjacent. Here, 3 women sit cross-legged on low stools, working looms set into the earth. Threads stretch taut between pegs, the women's fingers flying in practiced precision. A child runs between them chasing a chicken. No one flinches. And then you see the cloth. It's breathtaking, not flashy, nothing garish here, just endless strips of cotton, narrow but long, dyed in natural hues. Walnut brown, ochre, soft greys, and near black so deep they almost shine blue. Some have embroidered edges. Others shimmer faintly with threads of gold or copper leaf. The noblewoman picks up a finished piece, unfolds it, and lets the light catch every tiny deliberate imperfection. This took 3 weeks, she says. The thread was spun during Lent. You nod reverently. You have no idea what that means, but your soul tells you it matters. Then, a scholar's aside, Ethiopian weaving techniques, particularly in the highlands, were intensely local, often passed through matrilineal lines. While men occasionally took part, women dominated the world of cotton, growing, carding, spinning, dyeing, weaving. Some even used secret stitch patterns to encode personal stories or religious verses. Experts still debate whether certain geometric motifs had hidden meanings or were simply decorative. The truth is probably both. You're invited to sit. A small stool appears behind you. One of the weavers hands you a spindle, light, wooden, balanced like a magician's wand. Try, she says, grinning. You do. And it's awful. Your thread breaks after half a rotation. Then again, then again. The women laugh, not unkindly. One leans over and gently corrects your grip. Another adjusts the tension. And soon, you're doing it. Not well, but not breaking anything either. The spindle wobbles, but it spins. Your fingers remember something they never knew. You sit there, spinning clumsily in the late afternoon light, while goats wander through the courtyard like it's their living room. The weavers chat softly in a mix of languages, Amharic, Tigrinya, traces of Ge'ez. You catch the word Farangi, foreigner. You grin. One of them winks. You're handed a flatbread wrapped in linen, still warm, filled with a thick paste of fava beans, garlic and wild herbs. You eat without asking. It's incredible. And then you hear singing. Not close. Somewhere further up the slope, a soft female voice weaving a melody that floats like smoke. You stop spinning. Everyone pauses. The noblewoman smiles. She's dyeing cloth, someone murmurs. Of course she is. You don't move. The sun slips lower. A rooster crows despite all reason. The fabric in your lap feels heavier now, rich with the weight of hands and hours. Later, just before you rise to leave, the noblewoman holds out a scarf, pale grey with a border of yellow and rust. You will wear this, she says simply, so you are known. You don't argue. As you walk back toward the lower path, scarf over your shoulder, your host chuckles. Now everyone will expect you to know how to spin. You laugh softly. Can I fake it? He shrugs. Here? That's half the skill. The light turns golden. The looms disappear behind the courtyard wall, and up ahead, the path leads toward the sound of a boy muttering syllables into the dust. Your next stop. Apparently it's time to learn an ancient language. You find the boy exactly where your host said he'd be, sitting cross-legged in the shade of a half-collapsed wall, drawing loops and squiggles in the dirt with a burnt stick. He doesn't look up as you approach. He's maybe 10 years old, barefoot, eyes narrowed in deep scholarly irritation. You're interrupting something important. Probably a poem, or a revenge plot against his teacher. Your host gestures grandly. "This is our brightest student," he says. "He will teach you Ge'ez." The boy finally looks up, squints, and mutters something that might be "fine," or might be "why me?" Either way, you sit down slowly beside him, legs stiff, knees crackling like old pottery. He eyes your scarf, the one the noblewoman gave you, and seems mildly impressed, or mildly confused. It's hard to say. South Ge'ez. You've seen the script carved into churches, painted in prayer books, and stitched along the edges of ceremonial robes. But up close, it's a jungle of graceful loops and sharp corners. Ancient, beautiful, complicated. The boy points to one character, "Ha," and says, "Ha." You repeat it. He frowns. "Not like that," he says. He says it again, slower, softer, like he's pulling the sound from his stomach, not his throat. You try again. It comes out like a hiccup. He sighs and draws the symbol bigger in the dirt. Ge'ez isn't just old. It's foundational. It was once the everyday language of Aksumite kings, and though it gradually faded from daily speech, it lived on in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, in scripture, liturgy, and law. Experts still debate its precise origins, but most agree it descends from South Semitic tongues brought over centuries earlier, perhaps via traders, perhaps settlers. Either way, it's not just a language, it's a key. Your tutor teaches you 2 more letters, li and mi. You chant them like a spell, ha-li-mi. He draws a 4th, ra, ri, but then stops. "That's enough for now," he says, in a tone that implies your brain is small and your tongue clumsy. You don't take it personally. The shade deepens around you. The sun now leans westward, gold and drowsy. Flies buzz lazily. A goat nearby chews on something that might once have been important. The boy returns to his own lessons, this time pulling a wooden tablet from his satchel, coated in smooth dark wax. With a stylus, he traces lines into it, humming a tune you can't quite follow. You recognise one of the letters, your letter. Ha, a tiny victory. He catches your smile and rolls his eyes. Then, unprompted, he begins to recite. At first you don't realise what you're hearing. The cadence is mesmerising, the words soft, rolling, like water over stones. It's scripture, possibly the Book of Enoch, or a saint's homily. You're not sure. But he recites with the weight of someone who believes it matters. Each syllable lands like a footstep, a quirky note. Some monks believed that certain Ge'ez verses held protective power, that the act of writing or chanting them could ward off droughts, illness, or even hyenas. The boy doesn't mention this. He's too focused. But you wonder briefly if he knows. After a long pause, he turns and says, "You want to try?" You shake your head. He shrugs. That's fair. Then suddenly he brightens. "I'll show you the best part." He stands, dusts off his tunic, and leads you toward a narrow stone archway you hadn't noticed before. Behind it, half hidden by brambles and thyme, is a small, dark chamber carved into the earth. A chapel, a school, a hiding place. The boy ducks inside. You follow. It's cool, quiet. The smell of dust and candle wax lingers. Along one wall are shelves, wooden, sagging, full of tightly rolled scrolls. Some are wrapped in leather, others bound with twine. You exhale. You're in a library. He pulls one carefully from the shelf, sets it on a slab of stone, and unfurls it slowly. The parchment crackles. The ink is brown with age. But the script, elegant, looping Ge'ez, still breathes. "Copied by hand," the boy whispers, "by my grandfather and his uncle before him." You trace the edge of the scroll, not touching the letters, just the margin. You don't need to read it to feel its weight. This is knowledge as survival, memory made tangible. Scholars still debate how literacy functioned in rural Ethiopia, whether most people encountered writing through sermons, songs, or direct instruction. But here, in this tiny room, there's no question. Ge'ez lives. You exit into the waning light. The boy squints up at the sky. "Almost evening," he mutters. "Time for the fields." You thank him as best you can. Clumsy syllables, awkward bow. He nods once, then takes off running toward a distant patch of terraced green, shouting something about baboons. You stand alone now, scrolls behind you, mountains ahead. You've learned 4 letters and forgotten 3. But that's not the point. You start walking again. Your scarf fluttering, the dust soft beneath your feet, heading toward the place where food grows not from fields but from trees, or something tree-like, something false. You're about to meet Enset, and she's pickier than she looks. You follow the path down from the hillside library, the sound of the boy's voice fading behind you, replaced by wind rustling through grass and the faint bleating of goats. The terrain changes subtly now, less rocky, more lush. The slopes soften, the soil darkens, and you start to notice rows of strange, thick-stemmed plants with wide, banana-like leaves swaying gently in the breeze. At first glance, you think, bananas? But your host chuckles, as if he's heard that reaction 1,000 times. No, he says. Enset. It looks like a banana, yes, but it's not one, not even close. You approach a patch of the plants clustered together, each standing tall, some over 20 feet, like leafy sentinels guarding the slope. The stems are thick, waxy, and pale green, flaring at the base like trumpet bells. Their broad leaves flap gently, casting long shadows on the earth. It's oddly beautiful, in a functional kind of way. This, your host says, resting his hand on a stem, is the backbone of the highlands. And he means it literally. Enset, sometimes called the false banana, isn't grown for its fruit, which is inedible. It's the stem and the pseudostem, that tightly wrapped bundle of leaf bases that people use. Ground up, fermented, and turned into everything from bread to porridge, it's resilient, drought-tolerant, and capable of feeding a family with less fuss than almost anything else. You're beginning to get the sense that this humble plant deserves a throne. You step between the rows, the ground springy beneath your sandals. A woman waves you over. She's standing beside a small pit covered with woven mats and stones. The smell hits you first. Sharp, sour, earthy, a bit like cheese left out too long, but also strangely pleasant. This is the Enset fermentation pit. She pulls back the mat. Beneath it, layers of Enset pulp, fibres scraped from the plant's core, have been packed into the earth and left to ferment for weeks, sometimes months. The result? A substance called kocho, a dough-like base used to make flatbread, dumplings, or even gruel. You raise an eyebrow. She grins and reaches for a slab of it, plops it onto a flat stone and begins kneading it with practiced hands, mixing in a few secret ingredients. Maybe chili, maybe butter, maybe a touch of ash. The dough is then flattened, slapped onto a hot clay griddle, and covered with a metal lid. Smoke curls from the edges. It cooks slowly. You wait. And while you do, your host tells you more. People call it the tree against hunger, he says. It grows even when nothing else will. You can harvest what you need and leave the rest to keep growing. It doesn't die. It just pauses. Scholars remain divided on exactly when insect cultivation began in Ethiopia. Some say it's as old as agriculture in the region itself. Others argue it was a secondary crop, rising in prominence only as population pressures pushed communities further into the highlands. Either way, today it's the quiet champion of food security. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, of course the hyenas like it too. You blink. Hyenas? He nods toward the tree line. They don't eat the plant, but they know where it is. There are people, and where there are people there's food, waste, chickens. You glance toward the shadows. Nothing but whispering trees and a single, extremely judgmental cow. Just then, the woman lifts the lid from the griddle. Steam rises in a slow spiral. She flips the bread, crisp-edged and golden, onto a woven tray, cuts a piece, hands it to you. You bite. It's sour, a little chewy, smoky from the griddle. Not flashy, not delicate, but sturdy, satisfying. You could eat this every day and not complain. You dip another piece into a side of a yeeb, a crumbly, tangy cheese, and take another bite. While you chew, another woman beckons you to the plants again, this time to demonstrate harvesting. She unsheathes a curved knife from her belt, leans into the base of one inset stem, and slices it open with surgical precision. White pulp glistens beneath. She scoops a bit onto a wooden scraper and presses it into a basket. Her arms move fast. She's done this 1,000 times. You offer to help. She hands you the tool. You immediately drop it. More laughter. You try again. Slower. Clumsier. Eventually you manage to shave a few respectable curls of pulp from the core. They pat your back as if you've just completed basic training, but then comes the real challenge, guarding the crop. You're led to the edge of the field where a makeshift fence of sticks and twine lines the perimeter. Your host points to the trees. Hyenas, baboons, sometimes even people. We take turns watching, and suddenly you're handed a long wooden staff. Tonight, we guard. You weren't expecting to be promoted to agricultural security officer, but here you are. A rooster struts past, utterly unimpressed. For now, though, the sun is lowering, the shadows stretching, and your belly is full of sour bread and crumbled cheese. You sit on a flat rock overlooking the inset field, the wind tugging gently at your borrowed scarf. A woman nearby hums a lullaby as she scrapes the last of the day's harvest into a clay pot. A boy chases a dog with a stick that's more comedy than threat. A man squints at the horizon and mutters something about cloud patterns and goat behaviour. And you're starting to get it. The highlands aren't loud, they're not grand, but they endure, like inset, slow, steady, rooted. Tomorrow you'll learn why no one drinks water straight from the stream. Tonight, though, you'll watch the sun fall behind the hill and pretend for a few minutes you belong here. Evening falls slowly in the highlands, like someone drawing a shawl over the shoulders of the world. The sun doesn't so much set as sink quietly and without ceremony, behind layered ridges of blue and gold. Long shadows stretch over the inset groves. The breeze cools, the last birds call, and you're still on that flat rock, your staff across your lap, pretending you know how to guard a field. Your host appears with a water skin and a knowing smile. "Drink," he offers. You hesitate. He nods, amused. "Boiled this morning, with lemon leaf." You take a sip. It's warm, faintly bitter, and has a slightly smoky aftertaste. Not unpleasant. Definitely cleaner than the streams you've passed. And then, with a raised eyebrow, he says, "You should never drink it straight." You blink. "The water?" He nods. "From the stream?" "Number you'll see God before you finish the cup." Well then. Turns out water in medieval Ethiopian highlands isn't just something you casually sip. It's a process, a ritual, and in some cases, a gamble. Most families collect water from local springs or streams, but contamination is a real concern, especially after rainfall, and since filtration tech doesn't exist yet, boiling is the default survival tactic, or adding herbs, or, if you're from a particularly cautious family, both. And yes, experts still debate how common waterborne illness was across medieval Ethiopia, but villagers here are not willing to take that chance. You're led toward a nearby cooking area. Nothing more than a trio of stones arranged in a triangle supporting a blackened clay pot. A fire smoulders below it. Beside it, a wide-leafed plant droops in the dusk. Your host's daughter kneels, unwraps a bundle of dried herbs, and tosses them into the pot. Lemongrass, dried ginger, wild basil. The water hisses. Steam rises, carrying an aroma so strong it makes your nose tingle and your shoulders unclench. "This keeps you clean on the inside," she says with a grin, "and maybe keeps the spirits out." You don't ask which spirits. She stirs the pot with a carved stick. The smell is intoxicating now, earthy, sharp, comforting. She offers you another sip in a tiny wooden cup, carved from olive root. You take it. It's better than the last, smoother, slightly sweet. You're beginning to understand how tea became a shield here, not just a comfort. Some believe the tradition of boiling water in Ethiopia predates coffee, part of a wider cultural emphasis on purification, both physical and spiritual. It's also communal. People gather around fires not just to warm themselves, but to prepare safe water, share stories, trade gossip, and recite the occasional saint's tale. Speaking of gossip, a small cluster of women nearby have begun a low rhythmic exchange that sounds suspiciously like rumour. One of them keeps glancing your way. You pretend not to notice. Another pats the ground beside her, inviting you to sit. You do. The conversation continues. You catch only fragments, names you don't know, the word for goat, something about a cousin's lost sandal, and a mention of the Negus' taxes. You smile. They smile back. One offers you a roasted grain snack, slightly salty, slightly charred. You accept, because that's what you do now. Then, someone clears their throat. The eldest among them, a woman wrapped in 6 layers of linen and authority, begins to speak. At first it sounds like another tale of livestock woes, but the tone shifts. Her voice lowers, then rises. Others hush. She's telling a true story. The kind passed down like cloth patterns or marriage recipes. A plague, she says. Long ago, before any of you were born, a sickness that swept through the villages like wind through dry wheat. They didn't know what caused it, but one thing was clear. Those who drank straight from the river, gone. Those who boiled their water, alive. She pauses for effect. A baby nearby sneezes. Someone hands you another cup. The tale continues. How a travelling priest taught them to add wild ginger. How tea became a holy act. How the river spirits were eventually appeased with prayer and song. Some say the sickness was punishment, she says. Others say it was just bad luck. I say, boil your water and argue later. Laughter all around. You take a long sip. The sun has nearly vanished now, and the darkness creeps gently over the land. No electric lights, no street lamps, just the red glow of coals, the flicker of handheld lanterns, and the occasional flare from someone's cooking fire. Shadows dance on the stone walls like old spirits testing their joints. A child climbs onto your lap, clearly believing you've finished your tea. You bounce her gently. She squeals, then giggles, then promptly falls asleep. No one seems surprised. You've been drafted into child duty. Your host returns with a long cloak and drapes it over your shoulders. For the wind, he says, and the watch. You look out at the inset field now, a dark silhouette in the moonlight, rustling softly like a whispered prayer. Somewhere out there, a hyena laughs. A real one. Sharp, high-pitched, and much too close for comfort. Your grip on the staff tightens slightly, but no one else reacts. A boy nearby throws a rock in the general direction. That's the medieval Ethiopian version of a security system. Rocks, attitude, and extremely alert donkeys. You won't be alone during the watch. 2 elders sit nearby with spears across their laps. A girl with eyes like fire strums a simple rhythm on a wooden lyre. The hum of conversation continues, lower now, almost musical. You lean back, adjusting the child who now snores softly on your shoulder, and let your eyes adjust to the dark. It's not empty here. It's layered. Sound, scent, story. And in the middle of it all is this, a boiling pot of water. The simplest thing. But tonight, it feels like a shield. A boundary between then and now, safe and sorry, sickness and story. Tomorrow you'll hear drums and shouting, and maybe, if you're lucky, see the king himself. But tonight, you sip slowly, and you don't drink anything unboiled. You wake up with a start, though you're not sure why. The air is still, the stars are still burning overhead, and the child who fell asleep on your lap has now migrated across the mat, curled up like a cat beneath your borrowed cloak. Around you, the other night watchers stir, stretching, murmuring, or just blinking at the early light. And then you hear it. Drums. Not close, yet, but insistent, rhythmic, like a heartbeat carried on the wind. You sit up straighter. Your host, already awake and chewing on a stick of something vaguely minty, gives you a grin. Today, he says, the Negus passes through. You stare at him. The king? He nods. A regional one. Not the emperor, but close enough. You'll see. There's a flurry of quiet activity. People gathering bundles, adjusting robes, rushing to make preparations. No one panics, but everything quickens. Like a wedding, a royal visit, and a tax inspection rolled into one. You're pulled to your feet, the cloak yanked off your shoulders and folded neatly by a child who, again, says nothing but moves with precision. You're handed a new scarf, white, crisp, slightly perfumed, and told to try not to look dusty. Easier said than done. By the time the drums grow louder, you're already halfway down the slope, following a slow stream of villagers. The path to the gathering place winds between fields and groves, occasionally opening to wide clearings already filling with people. And then there's the road, not paved, not wide, just a hard-packed strip of earth framed by stones and shaded by towering sycamores. But you can feel it. This is where processions pass, where feet drum history into the dust, where stories get new details with each visit. The villagers line both sides, loosely at first, then more tightly. Children sit on stone ledges, whispering guesses about how many horses there will be. Old women adjust their veils, men sharpen their stares, and you stand between them all, a stranger draped in borrowed cotton and curiosity. Then the sound changes. Drums louder, feet approaching. You hear bells, tiny ones, jingling from somewhere unseen, and then they arrive. The royal caravan is not enormous, but it feels enormous. Horses with braided manes and red and gold saddles, standard bearers holding long poles with fluttering emblems, crosses, lions, suns, a cluster of horn players blowing notes that seem to bend around the hills, men with spears and long white cloaks trimmed in deep indigo, eyes everywhere, alert, proud. At the centre, riding slowly on a tall, dark mare, is the Negus. He's younger than you expected, maybe 30, but every inch of him radiates role. His robe is heavy, embroidered with metallic thread. His hair is braided close to the scalp. He does not wave, he does not smile, but he sees everything. His eyes scan the crowd, slow and deliberate. Not cold, just calculated. He's followed by his court, advisors, guards, scribes, and what looks like an entire mobile kitchen. One man rides with nothing but a scroll case. Another carries what might be a tax ledger. A third, to your surprise, leads a small goat. Your host whispers, "He's here to collect tribute," and remind us who protects the road. Ah, so it's not just a parade, it's a ritual of presence. Historical side note, the title Negus referred to a regional king, or high-ranking noble under the overarching emperor Negusanagast, King of Kings. These kings had their own courts, their own symbols, and often a great deal of autonomy. Their visits to outlying territories were part spectacle, part surveillance. And yes, scholars still debate how much power these rulers actually exercised in distant regions, but no one disputes the psychological effect of a royal appearance. Back to the road. The procession pauses, right in front of you. A hush falls, not silence, but a charged quiet. The Negus signals with one hand. A man steps forward with a small bowl of grain, offers it to an elder. Another hands out small scrolls, decrees, updates, perhaps even judgments from the court. Then surprisingly the Negus speaks, not loudly, but clearly, a blessing. General but sincere, a promise to maintain the roads, to protect trade routes, to remember those who serve with loyalty. And then he looks at you, only for a moment. His eyes pause, scan your face, rest on the scarf. You freeze. Smile, bow, melt into dust. He gives the barest nod, a flicker of recognition. Then his horse shifts forward, and he moves on. You exhale for the first time in a minute. "He saw you," someone whispers behind you, followed by a burst of giggles. "You're now officially a market rumour." The procession passes, the drums fade, the dust settles, and just like that it's over. Except it's not, because now comes the ripple effect. People begin to talk, quickly, energetically. What did he mean by that phrase? Did you see the third guard's belt? Was the goat symbolic? Why wasn't the salt merchant included this time? A woman nearby claps her hands 3 times. "Time to work," she says. And you, still a little dazed, are swept along the current toward food, conversation, and the kind of reflection that only happens after someone royal stares into your mortal soul for half a second. Later today, you'll eat by firelight, but for now, you walk, and the road remembers every footstep. You wander away from the now quiet road, still processing the fact that a regional king not only existed in front of you moments ago, but also briefly made eye contact like he was scanning your soul for tribute. People are dispersing in little clusters, some heading to the market, others home to finish chores interrupted by royalty. You, on the other hand, are gently nudged by your host toward a shaded courtyard behind a modest church. "Time to learn something useful," he says, with the kind of tone usually reserved for telling children to eat their vegetables. You round the corner and see him, the monk. He's seated on a small wooden stool, legs crossed, elbows resting on his knees, face squinting at a folded parchment as if it had personally offended him. He looks up as you approach, squints even harder and mutters, "You again." You have no memory of meeting him before. "He means you're kind," your host explains. "Ah." The monk motions you forward and taps the ground in front of him. You sit, cross-legged, back straight, trying to look eager and not intimidated by his terrifyingly precise eyebrows. "You will learn a few more letters," he says. unrolling a palm-sized tablet covered in etched Ge'ez script. The lines are uneven but beautiful. Dark ink, possibly soot-based, has bled slightly into the fibres of the parchment, giving the letters a softness, as though they've been read 1,000 times and whispered to by candlelight. He taps the first letter with a short stick. Sase. You repeat. Wrong. You repeat again. He grunts. For the next half hour you are verbally disassembled and rebuilt by a monk who's roughly the same height seated as you are standing. He walks you through 5 characters, none of which seem to stick in your brain, but all of which feel somehow sacred by the time he's done chanting their phonetics. Ge'ez isn't just language, it's structure. It defines prayers, songs, poetry, even contracts, and, as you learn, insults. The monk, halfway through explaining the difference between Echer Ha and Zerher, mutters something in Ge'ez that your host later translates as he studies like a goat trying to read the wind. You're not sure if that's an insult or folk wisdom. A quirky detail surfaces in the conversation. Monks sometimes used clever mnemonics to teach letters, turning each character into a symbol of virtue, vice, or story. For example, Sa might be Seatat, an hour, to remind you of the value of time. Whether these associations were widespread or local invention is debated by scholars, but here they're memory hooks used by a community that passes knowledge down face to face, breath to ear. The monk eventually softens, just a little. You're not hopeless, he declares. You're just foreign. You'll take it. As a reward for surviving your lesson, he offers you a cup of what he calls tala, a home-brewed barley beer, thick, tangy, slightly sour. It's not strong, but it tastes ancient, like something monks have been making since Noah got off the ark and said, "You know what I need?" Fermentation. The two of you sit in quiet for a while, sipping from the same gourd. Nearby, a breeze rustles the dry leaves of a tree that's half dead and half thriving, a perfect metaphor for your progress. Then he shares a bit of trivia that makes you pause. Some believe that Ge'ez itself was a revealed script delivered by divine hand, while others think it evolved over centuries from South Arabian roots. The truth, the monk says with a shrug, is for God to know and for scribes to argue about. Eventually he rolls up the parchment, ties it with a strip of dyed leather, and tucks it beneath his robe. "Enough," he says. "Your mouth is tired. Your ears are tired. Go watch some farmers yell at baboons." You stand, bow deeply, and try to say thank you in Ge'ez. You don't quite get it right. He grunts but doesn't correct you. Progress. Your host reappears, clearly trying to suppress a smile. "Did he say the thing about the goat?" You nod. "Classic," he says. You walk side by side for a while, the quiet of late afternoon settling around you. The sunlight is richer now, honey-coloured, catching in the dust as if the earth itself were glowing. And then, ahead, a commotion. Shouting, whistles, clapping. You hear the sharp bark of a dog followed by something much more chaotic. Squawking, high-pitched, repetitive. "Baboons," your host says, sighing. Apparently it's time to defend dinner from very clever, very hairy thieves. You pick up your pace. Because as much as language might be sacred here, bananas, even false ones, are survival. The first thing you see is a blur of fur leaping across a low stone wall, then a second blur. Then about 5 more, tails raised, screeches echoing, and a rain of half-eaten enset leaves fluttering behind them. The baboons have arrived. You're at the edge of the cultivated fields now, where the rows of enset meet the dry scrubland. It's a perfect boundary, one side carefully shaped by human hands, the other left to whatever animals, weather and fate choose to impose, and it's along this line that the battle is waged daily. Your host grabs a long stick and waves it overhead. 2 boys nearby shout and clap their hands. One of them lets out a high-pitched whistle that makes even you flinch. It's like a scene from an old comedy, except the comedy has teeth. The baboons are not casual visitors. They're smart, coordinated, and apparently motivated by spite more than hunger. One climbs a tree and breaks off a branch for no clear reason other than dramatic effect. Another pulls up a young enset plant, gives it a few disdainful sniffs and throws it behind him. You're handed a rock. "Throw near them," says your host. "Nod at them. You don't want them to remember your face." You pause. "They remember faces?" He nods solemnly. "Right. So, not enemies, rivals." The shouting continues. A woman near the edge of the field picks up 2 flat pieces of wood and smacks them together rhythmically. a kind of anti-baboon percussion. One of the animals jumps straight up in the air in surprise, then takes off running, the others following. You throw your rock too softly, and it lands about 6 feet short. One baboon stops, looks at it, then at you. You see understanding pass through his eyes. Not fear, not curiosity, just mild disappointment. Your host is more effective. He lets out a sharp command and charges forward, stick raised. The baboons scatter. A final screech echoes as they retreat into the trees, leaving trampled plants and upturned soil behind. Everyone exhales at once, then the laughter begins. Not cruel, not mocking, just amused. At the cycle, the absurdity. The fact that, even after all these generations, humans still can't quite get the upper hand on baboons. But they try anyway. A boy offers you a roasted bean as a consolation prize. You take it. It's dry and smoky and tastes like small victory. As you walk the perimeter of the field, you see the damage. A few uprooted plants, some shredded leaves, a half-squashed calabash gourd. Nothing catastrophic, but it's a reminder. The land doesn't just give, you have to protect it. From weather, animals, and sometimes your own distractions. You're invited to help reinforce a section of the fence, really more of a suggestion than a deterrent. Long branches are sharpened and driven into the earth at an angle, then bound together with twisted fibres. A woman nearby explains that sometimes thorn bushes are added, or even smelly herbs that baboons dislike. Whether it works long-term, scholars are still divided on that one. Some believe early agricultural communities in this region developed specific plant patterns to confuse or deter animals. Others think it was just persistent yelling. One thing's clear, this isn't just farming. It's partnership, with the land, with your neighbours, with the rhythms of everything around you. Every day someone guards, someone repairs, someone sings at the edge of the field to let the hyenas know they're being watched. A quirky tidbit emerges during the fence work. Someone tells you that long ago a farmer married a baboon. It's unclear if this is metaphor, cautionary tale, or simply the highland version of a bad romance joke. Either way, it ends with the farmer growing a tail. The moral shifts depending on who tells it. As the sun lowers, the field slowly empties. People drift back toward the village paths, their shadows long and stretched behind them. The quiet returns, not silence, but the kind of hush that happens when everyone's tired in the same way. Earned fatigue, dirt under fingernails, muscles speaking a language older than speech. You linger a bit longer, watching the last of the clouds turn gold. Your host points toward a small outcrop beyond the field. Tomorrow we burn the weeds there, but tonight we eat. The wind shifts. You catch the scent of something roasting. Goat, maybe. Or lentils. You're too hungry to care. You hand back your stick, shake the dust from your scarf, and follow the others down a narrow trail toward the village, toward firelight, food, and riddles you won't understand but will enjoy hearing anyway. Somewhere behind you, a lone baboon barks once from the shadows. You resist the urge to bark back. It's not that kind of rivalry. The firelight dances ahead, flickering between low stone walls and the trunks of acacia trees. Someone's already started drumming, a slow, sleepy rhythm that seems to tug your feet toward it like a gentle current. Your legs ache from all the walking, chasing, and failing to intimidate baboons, but your stomach overrides every other signal. As you round the bend into the courtyard, you're greeted by a wall of scent. Smoke, roasted meat, stewed greens, toasted grain, and something sweet and yeasty hanging faintly in the air like a promise. Lanterns flicker on wooden posts. Clay pots line the low stone bench that curves around the space, their contents bubbling quietly. A young man hands you a warm cloth to wipe your hands. A woman follows behind him carrying a stack of injera folded like linen napkins, still steaming. You feel like royalty, and also extremely underdressed. You sit, or rather, you sink, onto a cushion that feels like it's been sun-warmed and goat-approved. Plates are placed on a low reed mat. Injera, lentils, greens, and, yes, roasted goat. A leg, specifically. Charred in places, glistening in others. Sliced cleanly, no bone fragments, which you quickly learn is a sign of a skilled hand. Possibly the same woman currently staring you down across the fire to see how you handle the meat. You break off a piece of injera, scoop up a bit of everything and eat. Slowly. The goat is rich and a little gamey, spiced with something earthy and sharp. The lentils are familiar. flavoured with ginger and garlic, and the greens are lightly bitter, wilted in oil and citrus. The food is hot, deeply satisfying, and like everything else today, designed for eating with your hands. "Don't rush," your host murmurs between bites. "The food doesn't like it." "Right, of course." You chew more slowly. You listen. The drums are steady now. Not showy, just present. A heartbeat for the night. And then, as you expected, the riddles begin. It starts with a question thrown casually across the fire. A man in his 50s leaning back on one elbow, his voice smooth from years of honey wine and good timing. "I have a house with no doors, no windows, and yet, inside there are treasures. What is it?" Someone answers immediately. "An egg." He nods. "Too easy." Another. "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 3 at night?" You perk up. "A human." They all turn to you, slightly impressed. A woman raises an eyebrow. "That one came from Egypt," she says. "You've been reading foreign riddles." You grin sheepishly and pretend your mouth is too full to respond. The riddles grow more local, some about goats, some about the moon, some so layered in metaphor you're not entirely sure they aren't making fun of you. One man delivers a riddle that involves a rope, a hyena, and a grandmother, and you honestly hope it wasn't based on a true story. A quirky cultural note slides in here. Ethiopian oral tradition is rich with riddles. Karo in some regions, makakal in others, used not just for entertainment but for education, social bonding, and even flirtation. A clever answer is praised. A clever wrong answer gets even more laughs. Experts still debate whether these riddles originated in court circles or village fires like this one. The jury's out. But here, they're woven into the fabric of the night like smoke into cloth. And just when your belly feels full and your brain slightly fried from metaphor, your host offers you something wrapped in a banana leaf. "Defo dabo," he says with a flourish. You unwrap it carefully. It's a round, dense loaf, Ethiopian honey bread, baked in clay, rich with spice and molasses. You tear off a piece. It's sweet, but not sugary, fragrant with cardamom and fenugreek. One bite, and you understand why it's saved for special nights like this. Everyone eats slowly, chews carefully. The drums taper into silence, replaced by the occasional hum of someone singing to themselves, or the squeak of a leather as someone shifts on a mat. You hear someone murmur a short prayer. Not loud, just a soft thank you to whoever's listening. Someone else leans back and begins a story. Not a riddle this time, but a tale. A girl who outsmarted a lion, a rainstorm that followed a man for a year, a hyena who learned to farm and then forgot what he was doing. The fire crackles. A child leans against you. You don't even know whose child. It doesn't matter. You sip from a cup of tej passed down the line. It's lighter than before, just a trace of honey and warmth. Your eyelids grow heavier. One of the older women wraps a shawl around your shoulders without asking. It smells of ash and dried sage. Your host leans toward you and says, almost in a whisper, "Tonight is quiet. Tomorrow we walk to the edge." "The edge?" He nods. "Where the lights stop." A few people chuckle softly. Someone says, "Don't tell him that before bed." But he just smiles. And then someone yawns, and it's contagious. The circle of fire-lit faces begins to fade as people slip away to sleeping mats and low-walled huts. You lie back, watching the sparks rise like tiny stars. The sky above is filled with actual ones scattered carelessly across the velvet black. You're warm, federal, sleepy. And somewhere in the night, a goat sneezes, as if to remind you that you're still very much on Earth. Morning doesn't so much arrive as seep in, slowly, patiently, like steam through a woven basket. You wake to the soft shuffle of bare feet on stone, the low murmur of voices greeting the dawn, and the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to start a reluctant fire. The child who fell asleep on your lap has vanished. In their place, a half-eaten piece of defo dabo and a small stone with a star scratched onto it. A gift, maybe, or a challenge. You pocket it either way. Your host appears with a grin and 2 cups of tea, one for you and one for himself, already half gone. "We walk today," he says, "to the edge." You sit up slowly, your back cracking like old parchment. "You said that last night," he nods. "You were too sleepy to ask what it means." You want to ask now, but he's already walking, so you follow. The trail winds out of the village, past the inset fields and the baboon-beaten fence, and down a narrow goat path lined with low shrubs and dusty fig trees. The sun is still low, the light golden, filtered through haze and leaf. As you walk, your host explains, the edge isn't a cliff or a boundary. Not exactly. It's where the king's caravan passed years ago, where the last noble decree reached, where the last message from Axum was read aloud. It's the outer ripple of the known, the governed, the watched. Out there, he says, no one collects tribute. No one sends scrolls. If something happens, it's your business. Yours alone. You round a bend and pass a half-collapsed structure. A shrine, maybe, or a granary. Your host doesn't clarify, just touches it in passing, reverently. Some say the Negus used to come here, to listen. To what, you ask? He smiles. To silence. You keep walking. The trail begins to rise again, cutting across exposed rock and narrow ridge lines. Below, the valley unfolds like a map. Patches of green, winding paths, dots of livestock slowly rearranging themselves with the morning breeze. It's breathtaking, and also slightly nerve-wracking. There are no railings, and your shoes were never designed for mountain goat cosplay. Finally, you reach a flat outcrop. At its edge is a low stone wall, half tumbled, more symbolic than structural. This is it, your host says, the edge. You step forward, and the view is something else. Ahead, the land stretches out, wilder, rougher, more wooded. You can make out scattered dwellings, tiny trails, smoke from hidden hearths, but no villages, no markets, just space, living, breathing, unclaimed space. It's quiet, deep quiet. You suddenly understand what he meant. This isn't absence, it's presence, untamed, uninterrupted presence. Few come here, he says softly, except during plagues, or dreams. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Some say dreams are stronger here. The two of you sit on the low wall. He unwraps a packet of roasted barley and hands you half. You chew quietly, letting the earth speak. A scholarly aside slips into your thoughts. Throughout medieval Ethiopia, territorial boundaries weren't always marked by physical walls or signs. Often, they were remembered through stories, rituals, and the oral agreement of communities. Experts still debate whether these zones of influence were rigid or fluid. Probably both. Your host begins humming a tune, low, almost a whisper. It's not a song you recognize. It might not even be a song, just a sound for this place. Then he tells you a story. Long ago, he says, a king came to this very outcrop. Not a great king, just a tired one. He sat on this stone, looked out at the trees, and decided that some things weren't meant to be ruled. That night, he dreamed of a road made of fire. It led past this ridge, past the trees, into the unknown. He followed it. And when he woke, he turned back toward his palace, and never returned. You don't speak. The story feels like it doesn't want to reply. Eventually you rise and walk back the way you came, slowly, quietly, like someone folding a map back into their chest. When you reach the village again, it feels smaller. Not in a bad way, just cozier. More yours than before. You pass familiar faces, children running, a woman singing as she stirs a pot. Tonight, your host says, you'll see the watch. You mean the night guards? He shakes his head. Number the real watch. You blink. What's that? But he only grins. You'll see. You don't get a straight answer about the real watch all day. Not from your host, not from the old woman who gives you an extra piece of injera at lunch, and not from the boy who pretends to yawn dramatically every time you ask, like the mystery itself is exhausting. So you let it go, or at least pretend to. The afternoon passes with the hum of village routine. Someone's threshing grain a few courtyards over. Children are chasing a goat that absolutely does not want to be chased. The heat deepens, settles into your shoulders. You nap briefly under a fig tree, wake with a fig stuck to your sleeve, and then evening begins its slow descent. Golden light returns. Fires are lit. Food smells rise again, this time richer, heavier, meatier. Dinner is not under the fig tree tonight. It's deeper in the village, where the houses grow closer together like they're whispering to one another. You're led into a courtyard with low walls, a thick thatched roof overhead, and stone benches arranged around a raised hearth. The fire's already going, coals glowing red beneath an iron rack. And on the rack, goat again. But this time, not stewed, not chunked. Roasted whole, slow turned for hours over the coals, rubbed with salt, garlic and something peppery you can't name. You're handed a flat round of injera and a clay cup filled with tej. You sit, you wait, and when the meat is ready it's carved with a curved iron knife, sliced so thin it practically melts in the hand. You're given the rib, still sizzling. You tear it with your fingers, wrap it in injera, and try not to groan aloud as the spices hit your tongue. The others eat quietly at first, then talk resumes. Soft, warm, rolling through the courtyard like the smoke itself. And then, your host leans close. It's time. You're not sure what you expected. Maybe torches, drums, a secret handshake. But instead, you simply follow a few people out the back of the courtyard and into the narrow path behind the houses. It's quiet. Stars above. Just the faint sound of sandals on dust. You walk. Eventually the path opens into a small clearing bordered by short stone walls. A large tree, leafless and twisted, rises in the centre. Beneath it, seated in a perfect circle, are 8 people, no more no less, each holding a wooden staff, each with a small lantern burning by their feet. They don't look at you, but they know you're there. You're guided to a smooth stone just outside the circle. Sit, watch, don't speak, your host whispers. You obey. And then the stillness begins. No movement, no chatter, just silence. Intentional, weighty silence. This is the real watch. You realise after a moment that the circle isn't just symbolic, it's functional. These are the night guardians, yes, but not for defence. Not just for predators or raiders or thieves. They are watching the village itself, not guarding it from something, attuning to it, listening to the breath of it, the rhythm of wind through roof thatch, the murmur of dreams behind closed shutters, the bark of a dog that means donkey trouble, not hyena. They sit like statues, but you feel the alertness in them, the attention. A woman near you closes her eyes. You hear her breath, steady as the earth. A man beside her shifts, taps his staff lightly once, then goes still again. Your own breath slows. You feel your heartbeat. You feel the weight of the day leave your shoulders like steam rising from a bath. Then, from somewhere deep in the village, a faint cry. A baby waking. One of the watchers raises her chin. No words, just a nod. A few minutes later, a soft lullaby begins from that direction. The cry settles. They knew before the mother sang. A quirky note you recall now, some Ethiopian highland communities believed certain elders could read the night. Not through magic, through patterns, through attention, through centuries of accumulated listening. Whether this was formalised or instinctual varies by region, and scholars are still debating whether such night watches were ritual, practical, or both. You're starting to understand the answer is yes. One of the watchers shifts again, murmurs something so soft it feels like wind against your ear. Your host leans in. He said the wind has changed. You sniff. Nothing. But it'll rain by morning. And somehow, you believe it. The minutes stretch. Or maybe it's hours. Time has stopped reporting in. Eventually the eldest among them, a man with a beard so long it nearly touches the ground, stands. Slowly, the others follow. No words. One by one they extinguish their lanterns until only starlight remains. Your host stands, offers his hand. You rise, legs stiff, heart full. As you walk back to the village, he says only this. Now you've heard what the world sounds like when no one is trying to speak over it. You sleep deeply that night. No dreams. Just the memory of fire, goat, and a silence so complete it became its own kind of prayer. You're up before the sun this time, not because anyone woke you, but because the stillness stirred you. Your body has started syncing with the rhythms here, where light and breath guide the hours more than clocks or bells. You sit up on your mat, adjust your scarf, and listen. The village is just beginning to murmur. There's the rustle of a cooking fire being coaxed to life, the low voice of someone reciting a prayer in Ge'ez, and, very faintly, the sound of snoring. But there's also something else. A soft rustling beyond the edge of the houses. Not wind, not goats. Your host appears, staff in hand, face serious. They're out there, he says. Hyenas? You guess. He nods. Come see." You follow, heart now thumping in that too awake too fast way. He leads you past the cooking huts, along a narrow path lined with shrubs. It curves around the end-set grove, climbs a gentle slope, and ends at a flat lookout ringed by low stone seats. Others are already gathered. Young men, elders, even 2 women with babies wrapped tightly to their backs. Everyone silent, watching. At first you see nothing, and then, in the blue-grey dimness, you spot them. Shapes, moving low through the brush. 4-legged, long, slinking, hyenas. They don't approach directly. They never do. They move in half circles, testing, watching. One sniffs the air and lets out a short bark. Another sits on its haunches and stares directly at your group as if it's waiting for someone to blink first. No one does. Instead, an elder with a flute-like instrument, more reed than metal, raises it to his lips and begins to play. Not music exactly, not a tune you'd hum, just a pattern of breathy, wavering notes that float over the brush like mist. The hyena closest to you lifts its head, ears twitching. The others pause, then someone begins to hum, a deep, low hum that rises from the chest like a drum roll trapped in a throat. And just like that, you realise this is not a confrontation. It's a song, a lullaby, in a way, but for hyenas. Your host turns slightly and whispers, "We sing so they know we're awake." And it works. Slowly the animals lose interest. One yawns, another trots off into the trees. A third lingers, almost curious, before vanishing into the tall grass. The group doesn't cheer, doesn't clap, just breathes out. Someone chuckles, a baby sneezes, the mood softens. A man nearby says, "You scare a hyena by pretending you're not scared, but you keep it away by reminding it that you're watching." Another adds, "and that you see it as more than just teeth." You sit down on one of the stone seats, watching the light shift from slate grey to faint gold. The hyenas are gone, but their presence lingers, not as fear, as memory, as part of the morning. Your host pulls a small bundle from his shoulder bag, dried herbs wrapped in goat hide. He offers you a piece. It's bitter, fragrant, and wakes up parts of your mouth you didn't know could wake up. He laughs. That's for strength. Then he tells you something curious. In some traditions, hyenas are seen not just as scavengers, but as messengers, between realms, between village and wilderness, between the living and the not quite living. Sometimes when someone dies, he says, we wait for a hyena cry before we bury. You don't ask whether it's superstition or theology. Here those two things weave together like thread in the same cloth. Experts remain divided on how hyenas were viewed across different Ethiopian regions. In some places they were loathed, in others feared but respected. A few oral histories even speak of people who could speak hyena, using mimicry, rhythm and patience. The lines between animal, spirit and neighbour were often blurred. You head back into the village just as the sun crests the eastern ridge. Light spills down over the rooftops, catches on smoke from breakfast fires, bathes the goats in soft gold. You feel changed. Not transformed, exactly, but more aware, like your ears have been retuned to a frequency just below conversation. As you pass through the main courtyard, someone waves you over. Breakfast is ready, cracked barley with butter and honey. You eat slowly, still carrying the rhythm of the flute and the memory of eyes in the dark. Later today someone will fall ill, and you'll witness a healing that has as much to do with smoke and song as it does with herbs. But for now, you savour the warm spoonfuls, the morning hush, and the soft truth that here, even the wild things are part of the music. It begins just after the sun has reached its lazy afternoon perch, when the light is too warm to ignore, and the air takes on that sleepy stillness that makes even the goats lie down. You're sitting under the awning of your host's courtyard, sipping a cup of herbal tea that tastes faintly of mint and something that might be thyme. A boy passes with a basket of inset scraps, waving as if he's the mayor. The rhythm of the day seems set. Then someone calls out. A short, urgent call, not loud, but sharp enough to ripple across the courtyard like a dropped pebble in water. You stand. Your host is already moving, nodding for you to follow. A child's sick, he says. We'll need the healer. You're not sure what to expect. Bandages? A poultice? A lecture about unboiled water? But no, this is different. You're led down a narrow path that snakes through the edge of the village, past fields and fig trees and old, half-standing storage huts. You arrive at a home tucked into a slope, stone walls, grass roof, and a small line of hanging gourds strung above the door like charms. Inside, the child lies curled on a mat, feverish, breathing fast. A woman, his mother, you guess, kneels at his side, gently stroking his hair. She's calm, but her eyes flick toward the door every few seconds. And then the healer arrives. He's not what you expect. Young, barefoot, draped in white linen, with a satchel of herbs slung across one shoulder, and a thin wooden staff carved with what looks like script, but older, rougher, like messages etched by firelight. He doesn't speak at first, just kneels, listens to the child's breath, checks his eyes, touches his wrist. Then he stands and begins his work. First comes the smoke. He places dried leaves into a small clay brazier and fans the embers until the room fills with sweet, pungent smoke. It curls into the corners, clings to the thatched ceiling, wraps around your wrists like invisible vines. It doesn't sting. It's comforting, like memory made breathable. This is for cleansing, your host whispers, and to open the way. Then the chanting begins, not loud, just soft rhythmic syllables, half prayer, half lullaby. The healer's voice is low, textured, like water moving over stone. Every word falls with purpose. He places his hand on the child's chest and murmurs something too quiet to catch. The boy exhales, long and slow. Next come the herbs. The healer opens his satchel and removes a small pouch. From it he takes a handful of roots, dried leaves, and what looks like crushed flower petals. He grinds them together in a shallow bowl with a bit of warm water, forming a thick paste. This he spreads across the child's chest and forehead. The smell is strong, earthy, bitter, sharp with something spicy. The kind of scent that feels like it's pulling sickness right out through your skin. A quirky fact drifts into your mind. Some Ethiopian highland communities believed that illness wasn't just physical. It was relational, something out of balance between people, spirits, or the land itself. The healer's job wasn't just to fix a body. It was to listen, restore, rebalance. He takes out a small rattle, no bigger than your palm, and shakes it 3 times over the boy's head. Not for show, not for rhythm, for focus, for signalling. He chants again. This time, you catch a few words. Names, you think. Ancestors, invoked not as gods but as guides. Scholars remain divided on how much of this was spiritual and how much medicinal. Some argue that traditional Ethiopian healing combined precise herbal knowledge with layers of ritual that served social and emotional needs. Others suggest the rituals were the medicine, but no one questions that people believed in the process. The mother begins to hum softly, mirroring the healer's tone. The child stirs, not a struggle, more like sinking into something, a deeper kind of rest. Then the healer looks at you. You carry something too, he says. You freeze. He doesn't press. Instead, he hands you a sprig of something green and fragrant. For your dreams, he says. You nod, not trusting your voice. Eventually the chanting fades. The smoke thins. The paste dries. The child sleeps. The healer stands, nods once to the mother, and steps outside. You follow. The sun has begun to lower. The air smells of ash, herbs, and soil. Your host claps you on the shoulder. He'll be fine now, he says, and somehow you don't doubt it. You walk back to the centre of the village slowly, that sprig of herbs still in your hand, feeling like you've just watched someone repair something far more delicate than a body. As you pass through the village paths, people nod to you, not asking, just acknowledging. Because healing here isn't just a private act, it's communal, it touches everyone. Later tonight you'll hear someone singing again, not loudly, just enough to carry. And you'll fall asleep wondering whether the sprig on your mat is warding off bad dreams or inviting good ones. Either way, you'll sleep soundly. The sky is soft tonight, brushed in fading violet, stitched with the first shy stars, and stretched wide above the quiet hum of a village winding itself down for sleep. You sit outside your host's house one last time, cross-legged on the same smooth mat where you first tried barley coffee and failed gloriously at spinning thread. The air is cool, gentle, rustling with night breeze and the rustle of linen drying on a line nearby. The village around you glows in patches. Soft lanterns, scattered fires, the warm flicker of candlelight behind woven shutters. Somewhere close, a goat gives a final huff, curls into a knot of limbs and surrenders to sleep. Above you, bats swoop silently, their wings barely disturbing the dark. You've been here less than a day, or so it feels. And yet your muscles carry the memory of stone steps, heavy bread, cautious bows and watchful walks. You glance toward the edge of the courtyard, where a few of last night's watchers sit again, this time not in silence but in gentle conversation. One of them sees you, raises his cup in greeting, then returns to his story. You're not invited over. You don't need to be. You're part of the landscape now, just another figure in the hush, wrapped in shawl and starlight. Your host brings dinner, not a feast, not a ceremony, just a warm bowl of porridge made from roasted grain, softened with butter and dusted with crushed leaves. Beside it, a strip of dried meat, chewy, smoked over eucalyptus wood. Comfort food, ancient and quiet. You eat slowly. Then he hands you a gourd of water warm from the fire. Still boiled, he says with a wink. Afterward you lie back on the mat, the earth firm beneath you, the stars turning overhead in rhythms older than story. Around you the village shifts into full sleep, murmurs softening, footsteps fading, even the dogs content to watch rather than warn. A baby coughs. A lullaby answers. Someone nearby begins to hum again, low, almost subconscious, as if the music has burrowed into the stones and is simply seeping out now, note by note. You close your eyes. The breeze presses cool against your cheek. The herbs the healer gave you are tucked beneath your head, their scent grounding, earthy and oddly sweet. You breathe in, breathe out. Once, twice. The village exhales with you. And just before sleep takes you completely, you hear one last voice, a child's, half dreaming, asking someone whether hyenas ever dream back. No one answers, because there's no need. The night holds it all. Now, take a slow breath in, and let it out gently. You've walked through firelit courtyards and fig tree shade. You've shared bread with strangers who felt like family, and listened to songs that never needed instruments to be remembered. You've tasted butter stirred with stories, and smelled herbs that healed more than wounds. Here, in the highlands of medieval Ethiopia, time didn't race, it rippled, like water over smooth stones. The hills watched you, the sky carried your footsteps, even the silence made room for your voice, and now, with your eyes closed and your body still, you're part of it. Part of the rhythm, the hush, the warmth that rises from the earth and wraps around you like a cotton shawl passed down through generations. Let your mind drift back, just for a moment, to the curve of terraced fields beneath the sun, the soft call of early morning, the laughter that rose after riddles, the songs sung to hyenas, and the look in a healer's eyes that said, "You are seen. There's nothing more to do tonight, nothing to carry, no one to impress. Just rest. Let the darkness hold you. Let the stars keep watch, and let the world fade, gentle and slow, until there is only your breath and the soft whisper of a village dreaming beside you. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams."